Welcome everybody to our panel about TikTok. Today we have two wonderful guests to talk about different aspects of working with TikTok. So here we have Mark Rohde. He's the Chief Information Security Officer here at Wichita State University. So he knows about the legal implications and ramifications and guidelines around TikTok, particularly on campus right now. So we're going to pick his brain about what's going on with that. And then we also have our guest, Megan Lovely, who is the communications manager for the city of Wichita. And she works with TikTok as a professional communicator, so we're going to get her insights from that aspect of it as well. So please be thinking of questions to ask them towards the end. Any questions you might have about how TikTok works, how to use it as a communicator, anything like that. Why don't you go ahead and start by welcoming them in today. So if you guys wouldn't mind each just sharing a little bit about your background, how you ended up in what you're doing, and maybe a little description of what your day-to-day looks like, what your jobs are.
Please. No, you start. Please.
Hi, my name is Mark Rohde, Chief Information Security Officer here at Wichita State University. So what does that mean at the end of the day? I'm here to protect the information of the university. That could be the student information, that could be the research we do, or the partner information that is given to us as part of the community outreach we do. So think of it this way. I like to say if it's inside the computer, that's really where we come into place to protect that information. And so because of that, we get exposed to all the compliance, all the legal components that come into that protection, the grants, the contracts, and that helps us build how we protect that information day to day.
All right. My name is Megan Lovely. I'm with the City of Wichita. I'm the communications manager. I am the PIO also for the City of Wichita. My day-to-day varies. It's mostly, I'd say, my main activity is special projects, also public relations. I also oversee all of our social media. So when I have people that report to me and also work on those pages, but overall, I oversee all of that. So my main duties are getting information out to the public and also protecting the reputation of the City of Wichita. I also want to shout out my colleague, Nicole Gibbs. She is the Director of Communications at the county, Sedgwick County. We work pretty closely together, so I might loop her in throughout this talk. So.
Great, thank you. Can you guys share a little bit about how you interact with TikTok in your jobs?
So I'll start because I have the microphone. So being a government entity, we are subject to different rules than most organizations. My job is not your typical nonprofit, for-profit organization. It's its own little category. So that being said, we've had an up and down relationship with TikTok. We haven't never received a dictate to stop using TikTok. We have received suggestions from our partners at the state level to back off TikTok several times now. So we go back and forth on how we utilize it and how often we utilize it. We really haven't heard from them in a while, so recently we just decided to start using the platform. It is actually, in terms of engagement efforts, it's our most successful platform. It also skews to a younger audience, which Facebook and Twitter, honestly, are starting to skew older, especially for us in this community, and it's more difficult to reach those audiences on those platforms. So it's important to us to start utilizing TikTok in a more strategic way that's keyed toward that audience on TikTok and toward that age demographic.
So is it fair to just say the relationship's complicated? Can I say it like that? No, so we're in a very interesting situation here. You know, think of us almost as bystanders in some degree. The federal government has a set of rules called the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulations. And this tome of rules is huge. And it is everything you could ever imagine when talking about the relationship for purchasing stuff from the federal government or receiving funds of any sort. And so that becomes a challenge for us because we're beholden by federal law. You know, we got to follow those. I can't say, hey, we don't follow this today. We don't get that option. And since we receive funding in the form of grants, in the form of all different types of revenue streams from the federal government, we are beholden to that FAR. And so what happened was, you know, at first it was a recommendation, hey, you shouldn't use TikTok. These guys are doing things you really don't want. Okay, thank you. But that was just it. It was a recommendation. And then over the summer, the federal government came back and said, hey, we're updating the FAR 5204 saying you can't use TikTok. And it had a whole bunch of clauses in that, a whole bunch of requirements in that, and it was actually a fairly complex piece of legislation that went through. So unfortunately, we are beholden to this, so we had to sit down and say, okay, what does this mean to us? So we went back to General Counsel, and we said, okay, with the different relationships we have, student relationships, partner relationships, contracting relationships, federal government relationships, what does this mean? And they outlined, here's where you can use it, here's where you can't use it, here's the risk, here's what you should be aware of. So because of that, we don't have a direct relationship with the government where the government called me up and said, hey, Mark, put an end to this. Nothing of the sort. What they did do is pass some regulations saying, here's how you can do this in accordance with your acquisitions. And so that's what's really changed this. And that's also what creates the problem too, because since it's not a personal relationship, I can't call them up and say, listen here, bro, what do you mean? Like, flat up, you tell me what you mean. Instead, it's one where we have to read it, we have to understand it, we have to bring in our lawyers to interpret it, we have to look at what other entities are doing, and then we have to kind of figure out what exactly they want.
What was the response from the student body or from the community of Wichita State generally when this was announced?
Well, nobody likes to hear that things are going away. Like, nobody has ever called me up and said, hey, Mark, you made that thing go away. That's fantastic. Thank you. But it wasn't a massive outcry either, because at the end of the day, it's only our Wi-Fi. I can't control the cellular networks, and cell phone reception is pretty good across campus. So a lot of people said, okay, it's an inconvenience. I'm just going to get off the Wi-Fi, and I'm going to use my cell network, or I'm going to use my personal device, which is all outside of scope of the regulations. So for a lot of folks, it was just a minor inconvenience. You had some guys that said, hey, we'd really like to use this. Can we use it? And then we had to discuss, the downsides of doing so within the FAR. And we really had to say, okay, what do we want more? Do we want to use TikTok, or do we want to receive government funding? It was a close debate. No, I'm joking. It wasn't close at all. The value we get for research, the opportunities we get for our students are too high to put it at jeopardy for, frankly, I hate to say it, flavor of the month social media. Back in my day, we had MySpace, and we all got on MySpace and listened to bad music. I don't know, anybody know what MySpace is? Thank you. You're making me not feel ancient. But really, Facebook has kind of gone the same way. Its demographic is aging. At some point, TikTok's going the same way. And if you look at the TikTok demographics, once you hit 21, you kind of get kicked out, just because that demographic goes on to something else. So it's a very interesting niche.
Megan, has the city of Wichita been impacted by these privacy concerns with TikTok as well?
Yeah, a little bit. So we had people, all social networks are supposed to be approved by me. One of my departments does not like to go through those regulations and started TikTok without asking. And they're ones who have a little bit more of a security risk to their networks and the information that they're sharing than, say, like Parks and Rec and things that we usually post on our main city TikTok. So they were told they could not have a TikTok. They had one anyway, and then we had to go involve legal and then shut it down. So that is one department that we shut down, and we don't anticipate reopening for the time being until we get other legal advice from our department. But because of the sort of content, and we have a strategic plan, and we outlined the sort of activities that we would be sharing on this platform, and it was okayed by our legal department, by our IT department. So we feel safe in once again pursuing those activities. And again, it's what I call the fluffier aspect of our organization, the Parks and Rec, the Cowtown, the sort of things like that, just information instead of anything that would be publicly available on our Facebook, on our other social platforms.
Makes sense. For both of you, how might these privacy concerns around TikTok impact how TikTok should be used by individuals going into communication professions? So those who might be using TikTok professionally, how should they be aware of these regulations around TikTok as they enter that space?
Right. Well, it's definitely something, if you're going to be utilizing social media for your job in the future, you need to be aware of, you need to keep up on it. But maybe I'm a little bit caustic, but I don't really believe that the security concerns around TikTok are that much different than the security concerns around Facebook or Twitter or the other things that we're sharing online. I think a lot of the concerns, and this is just my opinion as Megan Lovely, not as the City of Wichita, are very politically motivated around TikTok, more than actual security motivated.
Man, that's a good question.
You can disagree with me too. That's fine.
Fight.
We can
I
fight.
deeply disagree with you. No. So actually now we kind of diverged into two questions. The first one is know your audience. So if you're working with defense contractors or you're working with areas of national security, TikTok's probably not your friend, right? Because they can't get on it, they shouldn't be on it, there's laws against it, probably not your primary focus, right? But if you look at other areas, hey, I want to hit that younger demographic, then yeah, it makes sense. They're not in that situation. So let's talk about the security aspects. And you're right, there's a lot of political motivation in here. Let's call it what it is. Our two countries don't get along, and we're not very good at getting along. And so that drives some of it. If you tell me that Facebook's not spying on you, then you're in for it. But what changes that? It's the level of spying. It's how much access they want, what information they collect, and how they use it. And so the reason that the federal government's so worried about it is to actually make it easy. Everybody know James Bond? Seriously, James Bond? God, I love James Bond. New ones are great.
They saw it on the History Channel.
Yeah, but Toast. Ouch. So the problem with James Bond is for the cool cars and all the stuff and the gadgets and the gizmos, think how much that guy cost, right? You only get a couple of them because those suits are really hard to find, but they're really expensive. And so when people think spies, they think James Bond. The reality of modern spies is not James Bond.
Yeah.
It's actually furthest away from it. It's people with money problems, people with other problems that can be exploited. And a lot of countries have found that, hey, we found out that if we give the gambling addict $2,000, we own him. Because if, he reports us, he loses his job, he may lose his marriage, he may lose his house. And now all of a sudden, this guy is very vulnerable to extortion. And so for $2,000, we can steal secrets through this guy. And so it becomes entrapment. Now, where does TikTok play in? That sounds crazy, right? Well, what if the guy's on TikTok saying, hey, I'm going to the casino today for the 5th time this week? And they can harvest that and they pull that out and they have a malicious intent in doing it. Not just advertising, not just selling you a product, but trying to figure out where this vulnerability lies. And then they utilize this against you. Now you go, Mark, you sound paranoid. You sound like way out there. Why would they do that? Well, look at what the stakes are and tell me why they wouldn't do that. China has a federal law for privacy. Yeah, hey, we like privacy laws. The bad thing is it basically says at any time you will give over any information relevant to the military to the CCP. Mm-hmm. We don't have a law like that. We have a separation between government and private. They don't. And they don't view private entities as private by the way that their government's made up. Is that right? Is that wrong? I'm not here to judge. But what the government keeps saying is, hey, there is vulnerability here, and this vulnerability is taken advantage of. So when we talk security, if you say, they're no different than Facebook, in a lot of ways, yeah, they're not. But how they use that, the intent of how they use it does change the equation. I know, there's no fighting.
No, I would agree with all of that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. What, kind of along those lines, what do you think makes TikTok different than other social media platforms, either by way of privacy or by way of ways to reach your audience or ways to engage today?
Oh, I would say that for one, I wrote this down because I never remember. It's in our plan, but yeah, the engagement is 6 to 15%, whereas it's 3 maximum on our other platforms. It has a lot better reach ratio. We have a small audience on TikTok because we stop using it, but it's only 1,000 some, but still we have an amazing engagement rate on it. I've had one video go viral in a matter of like hours, and it actually got taken down because it was the mayor twirling ribbon cutting scissors, and it got removed for dangerous acts. But it reached like 1 million people overnight, and I kept getting dings and stuff, and so yeah, but then it got taken down. It's very funny. He was thrilled, but it is, I think, a more positive platform for us. Like Facebook is very vitriolic. Even Twitter, especially as we see it, this sounds ageist. It's not. It's just the facts. As we see an older demographic, an aging demographic on Twitter, it's become more vitriolic. So I would say the engagement is a little bit better, but also our content is targeted for that platform, which means it's a little bit more unhinged and it's a little more entertaining than just the straight dry stuff that we put on other platforms.
Yeah. How can TikTok be utilized to reach your desired audience? Why is TikTok reaching them better than Facebook or Twitter?
I don't want to like bypass you unless you want to like wait.
No, I
Okay.
don't have a target audience
Okay.
most of the time.
I would say that one of our goals as an organization is to reach younger people, especially being a governmental entity. We're not exactly like the sexiest thing, and our goal is to inform and to engage to that goal. But we're not necessarily, our goal isn't necessarily to be liked. We are not Oreos, like that's not our goal. We're not selling you anything. We're just trying to inform people. So in order to better inform people, especially the next generation that's already voting and already going out in the world and is going to be our next community leaders, we need to find better ways of reaching that audience and helping them know, like, hey, where do I report a pothole? What's Wichita doing that actually impacts me? Not all of what we're doing is going to be engaging to every single audience, but I think it's important to make an effort to mix in those entertaining videos with a little bit of information. Our first video on TikTok, have you guys ever seen, who here has been on the City of Wichita TikTok? And it's fine if no one raises their hand. Nicole has. Oh, there you go. Our first video is about foxes screaming in Riverside because Nicole and I, during the springtime, 911 is flooded with calls about women screaming. But what that is foxes mating. So we made a video about foxes screaming in mating time, and our calls have significantly gone down. So yeah, a little bit unhinged, but it's effective. So.
With the TikTok algorithm showing people largely just what they want to see, how do you game that algorithm so that people see your content? How do you work with that?
Are you suggesting that not everyone wants to see municipal government TikTok? I take wild offense to that. Again, I think it just goes in your content creation. You have to make it so you are making stuff that's entertaining. So make it entertaining. It's not what we would be able to put on Nextdoor, certainly, or even Twitter or Facebook, again, with those aging demographics. I think the TikTok population is probably a little more open to content that borders on a different voice than the city of Wichita would typically use. So we're trying to find things that reach you a little bit better. We've done a couple giveaways on that platform, which, again, was a nightmare to get past legal, but we did it.
Great. how would you guys both say to approach TikTok as an individual in terms of both privacy and content creation?
I'd say if you're using it as an individual do you mean like as an individual creating content for an organization? Or
Honestly,
just,
either way, just as people to take away from this panel of like how they should approach their TikTok use.
right. Well, I'm the oldest person on TikTok. I love TikTok so much. It's rotting my brain. I mean, engage in the content as an individual that you like, because that will reach across other platforms. I've learned a lot on TikTok. If you're working for an organization, just know that, I mean, currently, like you said, it's changing, but the pipeline for people influenced to buy or make action on TikTok is much higher than any other platform. So it does have quite a bit of efficacy. And that's important to plan as you're working your strategy. Do you have anything?
No, I do. So we're going to talk about fraud. No, but seriously, as an individual, when you're looking at TikTok and you're looking at brands or looking at, local governments, make sure that's the actual brand or government. One of the things that I noticed was there is an FBI on TikTok. It's not our Federal Bureau of Investigation. And so when you look at that, there's a lot of parody, but then there's a lot of malicious content. So just be aware of what you're looking at. The other thing is, I've seen a lot of stuff on TikTok that is just blatantly, hilariously false. And as long as you can separate that, then it's a fantastic platform. The problem is where that parody or that attempt to fool you becomes malicious, and you look at that and you say, well, I'm not really sure if that's real. Be sure that you're applying critical thought to that, because there is a lot of malicious content on there. There's a lot of content that if you step back and you look at it and you go, none of this is even remotely correct. But the way it's presented becomes a problem, because you get so used to looking at it and saying, okay, everything here has an equal weight from the statement of truth, that when you do get to something that is out there, it quickly gets elevated into a way that you wouldn't normally think about it. The other thing is also keep your eye out for fraud. We see, fraud through TikTok, fake giveaways, and go to my website and get free malware. There's all sorts of things out there. But this is the same with any social media platform. If you give a bunch of humans something, one of them will find a way to abuse it. It's just unfortunately the way humans work. So, just universally, just be aware.
Thanks. Megan, how have you worked with your higher ups in getting things approved or in convincing people that TikTok is a great way to reach people, even though it is a little bit more unhinged or it isn't comfortable like other things might be?
Well, a good portion of my higher ups don't understand the platform or aren't on social media. So as we work our strategic plan, we just build that into it. And then we don't get legal approval for everything that we do. There's certain things that just make sense, like giveaways are something that we always get legal approval on. Or if we're talking about things that are grant funded, not necessarily for TikTok, we don't use it for that purpose, but as we talk about CDBG funds, other ARPA funding activities that we use to push out to the public, we get that approved through higher ups. So it really just depends on the project. We have folks who want to be featured on several social media platforms, even if they don't necessarily understand those platforms. So one thing I always tell folks is that you can strategize and you can use analytics to drive your planning and activities, but feelings will always trump whatever analytics you're building into things. So.
Yeah. What advice would you give individuals who want to thrive on TikTok?
As individuals?
Or as content creators?
As content creators. I mean, post consistently, I say that, and we don't post consistently. But really carve out the time, make it into your regular content creation schedule. Really know your audience. That goes for anything that you're doing as a marketer, as a communicator. Know your audience, target it to that audience, and really try to find ways that stand out a little bit, that are a little bit different from your competitors, from what's on your For You page. It takes a lot to break through my curated TikTok algorithm of drawer organization. That's all that I want to see at any given moment. I don't know if you have.
Now I really want to join TikTok for that.
It's so great. It's my favorite thing.
I think the big thing, though, is understand your platform. Understand your platform and your customers and what you're trying to go after, because, once again, if you're trying to go after defense contracting or high-tech manufacturing or, one of these specific industries, you're going to have a rough time. But if you go after where that platform thrives, the youth population, the certain demographics, you're gonna have a great time. And all these platforms from a social media perspective are different. They're different in how they monetize, they're different in how they operate. And so, this is a problem that we run into, is just because there's a new technology or different technology doesn't mean we get to say no to it. It means, hey, we got to go find it out. We got to understand what niche this fills, why it exists. Everything exists for a reason, especially something that's become super popular. So the question that I have is always why, and where does this fit in the world? And then we can answer the questions of how do we secure it, how do we meet legal compliance, how do we do all these things.
What do you guys think is the future for TikTok?
So in 10 years, everybody's going to go, what's a TikTok? As the next big thing hits. I know, because I'm the Foursquare mayor of a few places down the road. I'm literally the only no, I'm joking. I haven't been on Foursquare in like 10 years. So I think it's going to change to the next big thing, because, as this demographic gets older, the younger population's going to look at the older population and be like, no, I don't want you on my TikTok. That's for old people, which is what I've heard several times from my kids. So, I think it will change.
Yeah, I agree with that. I am now on TikTok, and my mom is now on TikTok, so it has jumped the shark officially. It's for old people now.
So how do you recommend that people stay up to date with the up-and-coming social media, and especially if they're working for brands or being professional communicators, how do they stay relevant with as social media is constantly evolving?
I think you just have to read industry trades. You have to try things out for yourself. There's a report that's put out annually. There's Nielsen reports. There's also Social Digest and things that you can subscribe to that give you the latest analytics, changing audience trends, things like that, and just build those out periodically. If you're working with a media buyer, you can definitely utilize their services to help you target on those platforms. Or if you have the software, which is wildly expensive, you can do that yourself. So just read trade periodicals. It's, I think, the best way to just keep up to date.
Well, funny enough, we try to follow this as well, so that way we understand what we're securing and how things work. And, it's amazing what kind of, and I'm just going to call them tribes, what groups are out there, what subgroups are out there. Did you know that people make their own keyboards? Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. And I fell down a rabbit hole, and I'm watching a ton of this on YouTube. I'm like, I got to build my own keyboard. My wife's like, shut up. You are not building a keyboard. No, she wasn't that mean. But that's a no, she wasn't that mean. But the reality is, there's these different groups that you can become a part of. You can understand where the trends are going, and you can see, I see a lot of this moving towards Discord, especially for the type of conversation. Back in the day, we watched the news. Now we watch podcast, and we listen to, we read Substack, and you could see how that conversation's changed and the media's changed. So if you're following the different groups you want, you're going to find out a lot about how they want to communicate and how the current system isn't really supporting that. So I mention that just because that's how we kind of keep up with the trends, but that's also very reactive compared to what you're doing.
We also do an annual survey, and one of the questions that we've begun asking is where people get their news to see those changing trends. And last year we saw a huge shift. So less than 13% of the population read the Wichita Eagle, for instance, even on a weekly basis. So that's a huge shift. We've seen that readership go down 4,000 subscribers year over year. So that's not to say we won't communicate there, but we are seeing a shift more towards social media. Still seeing good numbers for news media, but it's speaking to how we need to really focus paid efforts, of which we have no money, but when we do, of where we need to utilize those funds and where we need to put just extra efforts in terms of getting the word out.
Mark, going back to TikTok on WSU, how do you guys navigate the university still needing to use TikTok in places like admissions or other places where they're reaching their audience? How do you balance that with the restrictions that have been placed on WSU?
So that's the painful part. We really don't have a choice. You know, I have to go back to general counsel and say, okay, what does the law say and what can we do? And unfortunately, it's federal law. I can't change that any more than I can change state law. So we have to look at that and see what that scope is. And it's such a complex landscape. And I mean complex. The FAR alone for that is long. And so we get into a lot of conversations of, can we do X? And the answer is no, because the law explicitly prohibits that. Well, maybe can we do Y? And this is typically where they ask me to leave the office. No, but there's that conversation that goes on of, can we accomplish this? And so that's why, you know, we do what we do. It's not because we want to, it's because we have to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything else that you guys want to share about how to use TikTok as professional communicators, how to navigate TikTok?
Yeah, I think the best thing you could do is go follow the City of Wichita on TikTok. That would be a good idea. That's it. That's it.
Okay, the floor is now your guys's to ask questions for our panelists. So go ahead and just raise your hand if you have questions for them. Yes.
So in terms of like the City of Wichita TikTok, do you use it more for like internal communication with the citizens, or is it more like a tourism, you should come visit Wichita?
So the question was if we use it more for our own city audiences or more as a tourism draw. And the answer is we use it for our own residents. We have a tourism arm, the Visit Wichita, and they use it for a lot of tourism activities, obviously. And they can, you know, they have money, so they pay sponsored content for other areas and target other areas through their, you know, their tagging, their hashtags and stuff. Ours is really to focus on our own residents, and we've tried to follow some key accounts. We work with influencers a lot in town. That's a huge part of our page strategy this year and has been, and we've seen quite a bit of success with that. So even if it's not us, sometimes we have other people share those audiences or share those messages for us on TikTok.
I have a question. There's the option to like add location on like TikTok and stuff like that. So how do you like add the right hashtags or like certain locations while like keeping it secure without like without like causing your TikTok page like harm from that? Like how do you keep it safe but still like using your location to like reach other audiences? Does that make sense?
A little bit. So the question was how we utilize hashtags to reach other audiences. And I mean, there's a pretty active, active for Wichita, Wichita, Kansas hashtags that we'll put on a lot of our videos because we are targeting through the City of Wichita TikTok just residents. It hasn't been that difficult. If other cities and other people from other cities want to follow us, that would be fantastic. I mean, come here. We won't shake our fist at that. But especially with utilizing influencers to both comment on our content, share their own content about us and tag us in that content. We haven't had a whole lot of other people from other cities engage with our page.
This might be more on your side with the last answer you gave. That's the rules, that's the way it is. It's understanding there's not much you can do, but what impacts do you see on, and even things such as enrollment, it might be more of a marketing question, but marketing towards the younger demographic of students going to college. Because it may sound silly, but TikTok could be a huge factor in a student's decision. It could be a source of income for them and something as little, if they don't know what they want to say, something as little as, oh, I can't get on TikTok on that Wi-Fi, may prohibit me from enrolling in that community.
Oh, yeah. You know, I hate to say this, people are fickle, you know, and unfortunately, that's something that influences decisions. Now, where we kind of look at is federal law, federally, so that means everybody. And so we look at it and say, we're going to see these same requirements at a K-State or an OSU or elsewhere. So it's a little bit of a playing field. But we also have to look at it from that marketing perspective. And we say, okay, what's that next big thing? You know, where do we shift focus? You know, how do we shift focus so that way we can still reach these people, but we can do so in a way that, you know, satisfies all of our other needs. And it's not an easy answer. And that's why when we talk something like a TikTok ban, you look at it and you go, okay, we really don't like this because we like reaching this younger generation, but we also like to remain not in prison. I've seen the Yelp reviews for El Dorado Penitentiary. They're terrible. But, you know, it's how do we thread that needle? And that's what makes this really hard, and that's also what makes it so controversial as well, is because we need to try to make both sides happy to some degree.
So for the city of Wichita, I know companies like the Greater Wichita Partnership has had like campaigns focused on younger generations, like Don't Make Me Move to Austin. Oh, is that sensitive talk? But should you guys, instead of suggesting not have TikTok be banned from it, do you have backup strategies on what to kind of replace that strategy with?
Yeah, our influencer strategy on those other platforms has been pretty successful for us. So if we are kindly and gently told to not use it again, which very well could happen, we use paid content with those influencers to share our stories, to share those things. And like I said, partnership, Visit Wichita, our partners that we actually pay and our semi-government organizations can carry that water for us, whereas we have higher restrictions. But I mean, do you guys follow Wichita by EB anywhere, Eddie? Or Wichita Life? Yeah, so they're some of our bigger partners. I pay for a lot of their City of Wichita content. They're great. They get more reach for us than our traditional media partners. So they've been really successful for us.
Other questions?
So we talked a little bit about the fact that a lot of this TikTok ban might be politically motivated. As we move forward, is this more of a distrust in younger social media, and is this going to be something that moves forward with the next big thing, or is it kind of just because TikTok is from China?
Notice how quick that mic got passed. That's really hard to unravel. You know, there is, you know, let's face it, there is a lot of mistrust between the U.S. and the CCP. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. You know, there's also been a lot of bad behavior by the CCP. And so if this was, let's say TikTok was, you know, owned, operated, controlled, and influenced out of Canada, I think it would be a far different conversation. You know, it would be a far different gap to bridge. You know, and if you look at the values and you look at the assumptions, you know, we would better align with a Canadian-owned social media than we would with a CCP-owned social media. So that's what really drives it. And I think if the next big thing comes out of Ireland or France or, you know, any of those more friendlier countries where we better align in a lot of ways, I don't think we'll see anywhere near the same regulation.
Yes.
As a Canadian, I'm only speaking French and English a lot more, so. I was gonna ask though, Mark, you gotta have a balancing act too, I think. And what I think is kind of fascinating about with your job in general, TikTok has gotta be what, 0.2% of your concern? Or, you know, maybe it came a bit bigger because of the federal rules that came in. But like you say, you just gotta follow them and move on. But on the whole scheme of things, is this like not even a blip on
It's a blip. It's a blip because if you think about how TikTok's used, we have clinics on site. We have areas where recording is limited. And we have, people who are lower experienced in their lives when it comes to these regulations. And that's the older generation too and the younger generation. So when your primary mode of communication with others is a TikTok video, you can't do that in a clinic. You absolutely can't. You can't go to some of these research facilities, pull out your phone, and create a TikTok video. And so this is actually something that we deal with because we need to educate. The last thing we want is our students to go out in the workforce and get fired day one because they're making a TikTok video in a restricted area. We would have been failing them if they weren't aware of that. And that's not just in the defense space, that's in the high-tech manufacturing space, that's in the healthcare space. Last thing you want is, your doctor making a TikTok video with your medical condition in the background. Nobody wants that. So it's not just the super secret stuff, it's the super personal stuff as well.
Nikki.
It's not so much a question, it's more the, to kind of align with what you were saying with that just now. Because we were discussing social media in class last night, and the Be Real, that app, actually got someone fired at my job because I work at the cancer center and they were like, you have to take your photo, and there was patient information in the background.
So that happens far more than what you would ever imagine. When we educate people on proper use and etiquette in the clinic, we actually give an example of that of a paramedic that was let go after decades of service because they were basically taking pictures of the accidents that they'd come up to. And in that situation, not only was the paramedic fired, but the hospital that he was associated with was fined heavily. The hospital had no knowledge that this guy was doing it, and it was actually Facebook that turned him in, ratted him out. But, that's, if you think about our mission, a fine of any amount of money changes and damages our ability to take care of the community. It damages our ability to educate. And, we're razor thin in a lot of areas. So there's that risk, and not just the risk of the patients, but the risk of the organization. And that's why we do train on, hey, here's the appropriate places to record, and here's what you can talk about inside of a clinic and what you can't talk about outside of a clinic. And we see a lot of people in the world, let's just say, get into new careers and new endeavors because they don't understand those limitations in life. And they go either say something really terrible about their employer or make allegations, or go out and film something they absolutely have no business filming.
I have something to add.
Oh, please.
Talking about individual use, just a reminder, you don't own your Facebook, you don't own your TikTok, your Twitter, that belongs to the company. And we have a lot of law enforcement agencies who troll that social media, and regulators too, who make sure that people aren't breaking the rules. You have no idea how many people talk about crimes on their social media. Just crimes, just, hey, I'm gonna go commit this crime. And just like selling weed on Snapchat is the stupidest thing in the world. Like, stop doing that. Guys, it's not legal, I swear to God. But yeah, so we do a lot of that. And we can access any of the information that you put on there, your messages, anything like that. We do it a lot. So be smart about how you communicate if you are gonna do crime. I'm not advocating doing crime.
Can we get a TikTok video on that? Don't sell weed.
Don't sell weed on TikTok. You shouldn't have to say it, but you do.
Yet here we are.
So recently going into grad school and having to find a research topic, everyone says do something you're passionate about, do something you're actually interested in. And for me, that's TikTok. But with the restriction, it would be a lot, I don't have good data on campus. Like, no matter where I'm at, I can't get on my own data instead of the Wi-Fi. And the Supreme Court characterizes academic freedom as a characterization of the First Amendment. So what exceptions do you see, if any? For example, if I wanted to do a research topic and I needed to get on a computer and look at different TikToks, but they restricted that access.
So academic freedom and the FAR, there's some challenges there. And that's something that, we'd have to put in a request and see what exactly our general counsel says. But at the end of the day, academic freedom does not mean we are allowed to commit crimes. So there are limitations there. It does limit it. If that does change, then I think we're in for a rough time. So it's how do we find a balance if we can and if we're even allowed.
The library has free Wi-Fi and computers. Just saying.
The public library.
City Wichita. Serving you.
Yes.
I wanted to ask if you use TikTok as much as to inform, but also to be informed about what is going on in Wichita, like what other people are sharing about, or even in WSU, how the students because you can just click and find out a lot of stuff that are going on campus or on Wichita, and how you use the information to your benefit.
Oh yeah, we're, this is gonna sound creepy, but it's true. We're always listening. We listen to all of you on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. We have social listening tools. We do manual tools. Like I said, our police department, our KBI that we work closely with are always on that platform. A few months ago, we found that there was misinformation going on in the Spanish-speaking community that because of some issues going on with our partners at the state, they were worried to even go to work, that they thought if they were undocumented, they could be pulled over, they could be shipped back. So we actually held a town hall, and this was on TikTok. We see a large swath of Wichitans who speak Spanish or speak Spanish only on TikTok, and we have Spanish speakers who troll that as part of their job. And so we hosted a town hall with the chief of police, with the sheriff. We did it in English and Spanish, and we assured the community. Like you said, we find crimes all the time. We do social listening. We see a lot of misinformation that we try to correct with other posts and things like that. So yeah, to your point, we use social as much as a forward communication as a listening tool.
And we do something similar to some extent. A great way to learn what frauds are out in the community is checking out TikTok. And I'd like to say that's something just TikTok focused, but it's not. You see a lot of fraud out in Facebook, you see it out in Instagram, but we want to be aware of what the student community and our community at large sees, so that way we can better educate those groups on, hey, nobody is shipping you a PS5 for free. Like seriously, if somebody says they're shipping you a PS5 and all you have to do is pay shipping, they're going to take your money. So we look out on all those platforms to get an idea of what the actual threats that you guys face. From a law enforcement perspective, they do something similar, but from a university standing, we're only looking at how it could impact you guys.
Other questions? Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much again for joining us and for sharing your knowledge with us. And everyone give them a last round of applause.